All right, good walkthrough today. Closing off last game in the morning with the players, and as we mentioned, good win and really hard-fought game. Really commend A&M for coming back in the game and playing hard, and so now we got to move forward and have a gigantic challenge in front of us. Going to play the #1 team in the country and playing them at their place and at night. So I think the last time anyone's beat them there was 5 years ago before COVID. And, you know, the last head coach that beat him there, I can't really call and ask because he's now on their staff. So there's not a lot of answers out there how to beat these guys at home. So a lot of people have tried. And so we got to have a really good week of practice. You know, this is a very challenging combination now of having elite, phenomenal players and elite, phenomenal coaches combined and on the road. So there's a trifecta of what's the hardest thing to pull off, and this would be it.
Questions? You and Kirby obviously were both assistants under Nick Saban, and you've talked about the group chat dynamic that you had with him, but just what is your relationship like with Kirby?
Yeah, I tried to get that going on Sunday and this morning. Other people respond. He's not responded yet on it. So I was asking some other people if anybody has advice. No, I had a Drinkowitz, so he's on there, and but Kirby didn't really respond. So he must have we haven't played him before, so maybe he has a rule during the week of the game he doesn't respond to you. But he's done an unbelievable, I mean, obviously it goes without saying, like, he's done an unbelievable job, and they're in the midst of a run. I think I read where, you know, #1 in the country for so many weeks, and the next one to catch is the USC run. You know, when I happened to be an assistant there, so that just tells you how hard it is to do what they're doing, to stay #1 that long, you know, to be close to a three-peat is really phenomenal at any time, let alone nowadays with scholarship limitations, portal and everything. So again, that's got to be the only way that ever happens is a combination of phenomenal players and phenomenal coaching. Otherwise, you know, you would have lost a couple along the way.
Yes, over these last few weeks without Bowers in their lineup, what have you seen that's allowed that offense to kind of still just keep doing what it's always done?
Yeah, I mean, they got a lot of great players, and the quarterback plays really well and really smart, and it's got a great arm. And, you know, they added the 2 receivers in the portal to strengthen their position out there after losing one to Texas. And so these guys are as great as advertised. And, you know, it seems like, you know, and then when they got to really rise up, they do, whether that's to come back in a game like at Auburn or whether that's like the Kentucky game when there was, I imagine, build up like this of, you know, 2 teams coming in highly ranked and coming into, you know, and they obviously came in and took care of business in that game and rose to the occasion. This isn't their first rodeo of playing in big games.
You mentioned being at USC when you guys went on that run. You were at Alabama, obviously winning at a super high level. How difficult is it inside one of those programs to not get complacent or even bored a little bit when you're playing big games every week and you just keep winning?
Yeah, I think those 2 examples there of being fortunate to be at USC when we won 34 straight, I think, before we couldn't tackle Vince Young. And, you know, when left Alabama, I think we were at 26 straight or something. So, you know, to be a part of that is the only way that happens is a phenomenal head coach that has, you know, like Pete Carroll and Nick Saban and now Kirby Smart, to be able to hold that together, to be able to, you know, manage when you're going to have down games. Things aren't going to go well. It's football. And to overcome those poor games, to me, is what being in a super elite program, super elite head coach is about.
Lane, obviously, you see a few of these programs in the SEC. Is there anything you can do when you're building your own roster, I guess, to counter the elite athleticism that you're going to see from Georgia this weekend?
I mean, we try. I think that we run a pretty unique offense that when it's working, just like last week's game, there's 3 and outs and it doesn't work. And then there's 5 touchdowns and 2 attempted field goal drives. So when that works and you get it going, that neutralizes, the super elite defensive talent. When it doesn't, it's not pretty. So that's done on purpose. When you came here, having that, knowing that there are going to be games, that you're going to play the best players in college football on the same roster, and there's going to be, especially in this conference on defense, those games are going to happen. So you better have something creative and be very creative even within that week's game plan, or it doesn't work. I mean, talent wins a lot of games, so you got to find a way to neutralize that at times.
Lane, looking back on your career, whether it be an assistant coach or a head coach, how does this team rank in regards to resiliency, coming back, winning games that sometimes it takes late into the game to win? How does this year's team rack up against those?
That's a good question. I don't think I had really thought about it that way. I think when you phrase that off the top of my head, I don't really remember being around. Like I joked with them, they're kind of like, the cardiac kids. To have so many like games that go to the wire, got to come back from being behind in fourth quarters. So I don't know that I really remember this many within a season, especially not a full season yet. But it says a lot about them. This is a really cool group of kids to coach, and you guys know I'm very honest. Every year isn't like that. It just is what it is. And this is a really, really neat group that overcomes things, which is hard nowadays in the portal era. When you have a lot of portal guys, it's hard to put selfish things behind you because you're new to programs and you want stats, and a lot of times you transfer for a reason. So to put those things behind and take smaller roles in special teams or limited reps on offense and defense says a lot about these guys.
Lane, talking about Saturday's game, obviously I'll get a chance to look at that film, and do you get a chance to question the SEC about some of those holding calls we keep getting every Saturday?
We turn those in. So I don't know why I really do, because then it just kind of makes you more upset sometimes when they come back and agree that they're not. But my thing's more, you're going to make mistakes as officials. We're going to make mistakes as coaches, and, maybe you make a mistake on the radio sometimes. So that is what it is. My issue more is, because those happen both ways. We had one that maybe wasn't pass interference on them, but the protection of the quarterback, and I just think that's a different one. I think that should be the highest concern always, because the quarterback throws from a different position than other players and is vulnerable to hits. And I've just always thought that should be more like the NFL, and they should be very protected because they play a really hard spot. And when quarterbacks get hurt, you see programs that have all these other things in place can play, all of a sudden the team's completely different. I always look at the Oklahoma-Texas a year ago, and, when all of a sudden it's 50-0. So I just think those guys should be protected better. And, I was asked yesterday by you guys about the LSU-Alabama hit. I don't know how that's not targeting. And if it's not, I think you got a problem that's okay, and that defensive players watch, I can do that, and I can stay in a game and take the other team's quarterback out. That's an issue.
Take questions up top.
Lane, you kind of talked about all the big games that you've been a part of too, with Texas and Alabama. And there were a lot of people talking about this game as being such a huge one for the program's history. I guess, where does this Saturday's game kind of rank compared to other games that you've coached in terms of kind of magnitude of games that you've been a part of as a head coach?
I kind of feel like this one's different, whether it's right or wrong. It's kind of more like playing with house's money. Meaning, no one expects us to win. We're double-digit underdogs, and I feel like those big games over the years at the places and stuff, those were more like they were the big game or the national game, and the teams were considered close. I think that, no one's expecting us to win or probably even play them close. So we'll just go in there and see what happens.
And is the college football playoff, I mean, you always talk about the big goals and expectations you have for the program. Is the college football playoff something that you talk about with these guys at all? And yeah, because, obviously a win Saturday would go a long way in kind of achieving that goal.
Yeah, we don't ever talk about that because I think that's out of our control. I think people get up and start lobbying about that and focus on that. And you see a lot of people do that and then lose. So I actually mentioned it to him this morning. I usually don't even, just saying, hey, because we have so many players, new players, this is why we don't talk about it. We don't mention it. We don't put it on goals or any of that stuff because that's other people voting on something. So, and if you don't keep winning, none of that matters at all. So don't worry about that if it ever happens.
Coach, when you wanted to get Trey Harris and he comes in and you felt like you had a good get in the portal, are you a little surprised though that he's been this good and this effective?
I think it's kind of like the draft. You don't know for sure with guys. We'd seen him make plays. I think when he came on his visit and sitting down with him and seeing what type of culture kid he is and how important it is to be great to him and how he does all the little things and, all he wants to do is watch film. How can I get better? Wants to learn, pushing through injuries, playing even when probably shouldn't, at Alabama for a few plays there. Just shows who he is and who his makeup is. So I think that's where we kind of went from we got a really good player to an elite player.
Lane, you mentioned before the season got started that since you have so many transfers that it's going to be on some of the guys that have already been here for these guys to, just bond with each other. How would you say that they have bonded and gelled with each other to have gotten off to such a good start to the season?
Well, I think that they've done a great job with that. I think we saw last year where we started well and then got in some harder games and didn't do as well because things didn't start going their way. And I think that's probably more the norm when you put so many kids together that came from different places. And, I think this is probably more of an outlier that these guys who haven't been together hardly at all, and a lot of the star players just got here, that they're overcoming adversity in games and finding a way to win. Says a lot about them.
Wayne, just following up on what you said about needing creativity in games like this offensively, is that easier to put into practice with older guys you would go into the transfer portal and get?
Maybe a little bit, but you still got to come up with them. And you saw one in A&M where you're playing against elite defensive players that if you can find a way to steal a touchdown, on something like the Jordan play where it's just an easy touchdown and be creative and out scheme something. That's just part of our system, but especially when we go to try to have a chance against these really good defensive players and coaches.
Lane, you were in this spot last year, 8-1 after an A&M win, the big game in Alabama coming up. We know what happened. Is there anything that can be learned, big or small, even throughout the week leading up to the game that y'all can use for this week?
No. I think that would be more of a next week question. If the game doesn't go well, making sure that you don't have a letdown then, because I don't think that the issue was a year ago, preparing and being ready for the Alabama game. We have the ball in our hands, at the end of the game inside the 20 to go win the game. So I think if you look at it that way, they prepared really well and performed well. We just didn't finish it. So I think that's a better question next week.
Any other questions for Coach?
All right, guys. Thank you.